welcome to our panel on global supply chain strategies. I'm joined by Frank Mackay. I'm just checking which order everyone's sitting in. Frank Mackay from Jabil, and Dean Bain, PSVP and General Manager Supply Chain for Cooper. Rashid Mohammed, Executive Vice President Global Operations and Business Technology for Alcatel-Lucent Enterprise, and John Ham, Global Supply Chain Transformation Leader, JTI. Do you want me to say Japan Tobacco International, just in case? Just in case anybody is not aware.
Need to decode it. Yeah.
But to tell me a little bit, and to tell the audience a little bit more about all of you, could you just give me 30 seconds about yourself and your career?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having us, and thanks to the audience for turning up. So, yeah, Jabil, I've been there for 28 years. We are an EMS, so we're the outsourcing company that builds for some of the most premier brands in the world. They're driving innovation. I guarantee whoever's in the audience has got something that Jabil has built on their person, whether it's their cell phone, their watch, their AirPods, or any of their medical devices they may have in their bags. So it's a fun place to be, and there's nothing more exciting than being in procurement right now.
Good to know. Dean?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So I'm Dean Bain. I'm a Senior Vice President at Coupa, responsible for our supply chain practice. Been with Coupa now for 2 years. Spent the last 20 years in supply chain technology on the software side of the house. Coupa itself is known for its AI native total spend management. So we provide solutions to manufacturers, distributors, wholesalers that handle both direct and indirect procurement.
Thank you. Rashid?
Hey, I'm Rashid Mohammed. I'm the Executive Vice President for Alcatel-Lucent Enterprise. My responsibilities include the whole global operations and business technology, which is CIO function, and a little bit of quality also, just make sure everything is okay end to end. Alcatel-Lucent Enterprise, it's a pretty old company. Now the main focus where we are in is in the enterprise space. We connect all the data, voice, and cloud, and end-to-end connectivity in this area. So, thank you.
Thank you. John?
Yes, I'm John Ham. I'm leading the supply chain transformation in JTI. JTI is the world's second largest tobacco company, Japanese company, but headquartered in Geneva. Transformation is not that often that code word for restructuring or efficiency. This is a capability and a growth play. So it's very much about building future supply chain capability to cope with growth, but also the resilience challenges being thrown at us. So that's my role. My background is consumer goods. So I spent most of my career with Procter & Gamble, which is where I learned most of my very good and very bad habits.
Well, thank you very much. And to kick us off, Frank, tell me, can you give me one key quality that a global supply chain strategy needs to have in today's environment?
I don't know if I can just give you one, but
I'll settle for 2 or 3.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm going to just say the same thing that most folks that I think sit in these roles would say, which it is around people, process, and technology. So it is those three. And they all have to be intertwined and linked. But if I just pull up the people and the tech, you can't. It doesn't matter, what tech it is. If you don't have really smart people figuring things out, then whatever tech you have, is just tech. And I think we've done a pretty good job of investing in our people and the talent and making sure that we've got a really broad depth of expertise within the company when it relates to procurement supply chain. And the reason that's so important for Jabil is about 75% of our revenue is cost of material. So if we don't get it right, then nothing else kind of matters. So we are kind of front and center when it comes to Jabil. I report directly our CEO. That would tell you how important procurement and supply chain is. And we have a pretty robust program around making sure that we have retention of that talent as well. So talent kind of beats everything. And then I would obviously say as well that just that investment and that continued never-ending development and making sure that we have access to, understand, and implement the absolute best technology and innovation that's going out there. We're just on a relentless, I'll even say maniacal journey to make sure that we never have our customers come and question that we haven't invested enough or that we don't understand, where the world is going when we think about procurement supply chain and just how complex it is and how fragile it is as well.
Indeed. Well, we'll talk about all of that as the panel goes on. But key quality for you, Dean. I saw you nodding there.
Yeah, I mean, I think Frank talked about the fragility of the supply chain itself, and as a bit different from the other three panelists here, coming from the tech side. So we get to see a lot of different examples of how customers are responding to the world we live in today. And what we see the most and what we see where customers that are successful is, I'd put the word adaptive on it, right? So thinking about the adaptiveness of having strategies in place, people in place, processes in place, and technology that can support an adaptive supply chain. So we all know that the world we're living in today is certainly not stagnant. It's not standing still, and we're getting thrown more and more challenges at a faster rate of pace than we've ever seen before. And if we don't have contingency plans, if we don't have the ability to understand what our networks look like, what scenarios are available to us, and how we respond, it's too late. So we have to have almost pre-built these playbooks to understand what we do when something happens, when disasters occur, when supply falls short, when disruption is hit us. And so, providing a platform that allows our customers to do that, to build those playbooks, to have a digital representation of their supply chain, of their network, and to run simulations and optimizations that help them really respond.
Thank you. Rashid.
Yeah, I think, like as Frank mentioned and Dan mentioned, people, process, technology, adaptability, this all are key, those are the foundations for us these days. But as we go through the phases, pre-COVID, I think supply chain mean lean. Whenever you talk to supply chain folks, you have to have a lean supply chain. Then came all the COVID and supply chain crisis, and here everybody said, hey, now how I can be resilient, how it can be robust. So the resilience is one of the key qualities the supply chain needs to have. And here, how we can have resilience with a predictive supply chain. So this is probably now, adaptability, all those things, just comes in there. So how do we manage that? That's the complexity we need to have.
Thank you. And John.
Wow, all the good stuff's already been said.
There's no buzzwords left.
No, I think it's really encouraging that not just on the panel, but all through the participants in the conference, we're talking people, process, technology. The only add I would give is it's in that order. So it's people first is for me at the heart of a good strategy. And the way I think about it and the way we think about it in JTI is we have 20,000 employees in supply chain. And I think that's pretty common. It's usually in most companies, operations or supply chain is, first, second in terms of population size. But that's 20,000 potential volunteers. And, we need more thoughtful strategies on how do we inspire, engage, motivate, equip, enable those volunteers to do the magic. And remember, the definition of a volunteer is someone who's going to go that extra mile, who's going to be passionate and bring their ideas and their passion into play on the strategy because they want to, not because they have to. And when you get, a core doing that, magic happens. But it's getting the strategy around that. It doesn't happen on its own. And if you don't pay attention to it, it falls away really quickly. So that, for me, has to be, not just an afterthought in the strategy. It needs to be front and center.
Which kind of leads nicely into what I was going to ask next, which is in a global company with such complex supply chains, where do you actually start with the strategy?
I'm going to take that one. I think with complexity, I always like to follow the Charlie Munger adage. This delightfully young audience might not know who Charlie Munger is. Berkshire Hathaway, Buffett. He was the brains and the creativity behind that partnership. But one of his mantras was always invert, always invert. So this was the key to problem solving. And when we talk complexity, I think we often fall into the trap of analyzing what we have. So whether that's your product portfolio, whether it's your processes within the company, whether it's the way you're organized across the matrix of the organization, we look at what we have and then we try and optimize. If we invert, we should ask the question, what do we need? And then if you build what you need, complexity is actually a positive thing. If you have the right complexity to manage your business. So that's my approach, and that's what I would advise, is just change the question around. You might come up with a different answer. And one example of that, very simple example, is I imagine lots of people have been involved in portfolio complexity reduction. What typically happens is you bring in a consultant, or you start a big analytics exercise, and you scare the hell out of your marketing and sales group in doing it, and then you can conclude what you knew at the beginning, which is about 80% of your sales and 80% of your profit comes from 20% of the portfolio. So then you start trying to reduce the complexity on the tail. You don't address the fundamental issues, and then you realize, a couple of years later, it's crept back again. So I think that is just an example of how this inverts. Decide what portfolio, what technology you need to deliver the business, and then celebrate that complexity. Don't view it as a negative.
Anyone else want to chip in?
Maybe I can just add, for us, like when you operate in around 60 countries with almost 8,000 SKUs, which we need to have with different verticals, that's where you do first thing, from supply chain, can you optimize the SKUs, right? Go. But the real challenge, for any supply chain, the mantra of on-time delivery with the highest quality, the lowest cost, like with maximum customer satisfaction. You do this, and when you look at the last 6 years, I think one of the things which I, encourage and my team is, always automate as much as possible what is predictable, right? So you have time for the unpredictable to look at, because this word of predict the unpredictable has become a norm for all of us, right? Because every year the challenge is different. 2022, when the chips we need was 52 weeks. We look at, how can you get that? Even if you had allocation, you didn't have it, right? So how do we make sure that the allocation, when it comes, it's really predictable to say, what are the most important ones we can? So that's one of the key things which I really see. And obviously visibility, at each stage of the game. So, like earlier we could have the visibility a little bit high level. Now you draw the whole supply chain end to end and have visibility at each stage, which makes you adaptable at each part you can.
So you asked that question, against the climate of disruption, which we're used to at the moment, how do you make sure that you can respond quickly to change, Frank?
Yeah, and so loved what the guy said. Don't think I can follow that up and give it justice, but we've taken a little bit of a risky approach to ensure that we try and minimise the next disruptive thing that's coming, which nobody in this audience knows what it is. We just know there's something coming that's going to test our resiliency and how fragile the supply chain actually is, which we've really learned over the last kind of 5 years or so. And I don't think it's going to get any less complex, less risky. we've actually invested not just in the tech side and the people side, but we've actually invested in acquisitions of companies, and I'll just touch on, we've made 4 inside the procurement supply chain organisation, 2 of them deliberately to address what Rashid was referring to. There's another constrained market coming, there's another semiconductor shortage market coming. It's just when, and it's just how severe will it be. So we've actually acquired 2 companies that will allow us to go into a supply chain ecosystem that we didn't have prior to these acquisitions. It will give us a better chance of ensuring that we've got product in the semiconductor space that we need to keep our customers in production. So we've kind of put our money where our mouth is. It might be the last thing I do. If it doesn't pan out, I'll be leaving Jabil after 28 years. But
let's hope it doesn't come to that.
Yeah, it was definitely some of the even my own team are questioning me, saying, "Did you really need to do that?" And the answer is no. But it's the right thing to go do, and it is risky. But I can't just sit back here, and I'm guarantee the guys are the same. We can't just sit back and wait for the next disruption to come and then claim that, oh my God, we should have seen this, we should have done something. Everybody's doing something different. That's just we've kind of did some acquisitions on it.
Dean, how's your business responding?
Yeah, I mean, from a technology perspective, right? I mean, I talked about this adaptive supply chain, as we like to call it, and having these kind of prescriptive playbooks to understand how the business responds and what the actions are you can take. We all wish we could predict what's going to hit us next. We don't know. We can only have a hypothesis and have plans around them and contingencies. But the biggest thing that we're seeing right now, and what our customers are coming to us and collaborating with us on, is like, how do we get, if we can't predict, how do we sense? And so we're spending a lot of time and energy in building much stronger collaborations between buyers and suppliers, so that we can understand when those shortages, when those disruptions, when those delays are occurring, and react in the now versus the then. And so it's the ability to see that coming, the ability to have a response plan in place, and then the ability to execute against that allows us to at least protect as much of our margin as we can, allows us to respond as quickly as we can, and save the image, the brand of the company at the end of the day. So.
Because in a sense, you're only as strong as the weakest link in the chain,
Yeah.
Very
correct?
much so, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So, Rashid, what do you say to that? What are you doing to combat change?
In the world today, I don't think technology is a problem, right? You look at everybody, there is a lot of tools, a lot of things, but the challenge is what we see is something called everybody wants to localize now, right? And we went into the globalization, taking the advantage, and then going into now the localization. So everybody wants the advantage of globalization, but they want to do everything localized. So it's a globalized localization, which is required, which is kind of a tough word. But really, I think here is where the human aspect of also is coming in. I think we need to make sure that the central governance, what you're seeing at the central teams, is adaptable and making sure that the local teams are, that's where the biggest challenge is. Because, for any supply chain, sales forecast accuracy, guys will agree, I want a perfect forecast accuracy. Never happens, right? And all the things comes in the last minute. And how are you reactive into this? So I think with all these different aspects of, wanting, the localized product with a global cost, optimized chain, how do we make sure that we have our people enabled to do this? And this requires the best talent. So however technology you take in any aspect, human factor comes into this, and you have to make sure that your human factor is trained and adaptable into these things.
People will go rogue if they don't have the training and don't understand the tech, correct?
Yeah, they're filling the gaps.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a culture piece then, presumably, around this, would you say? in taking your teams along with you, John?
In taking the teams along, absolutely. I mean, culture is such an important part in driving behaviours. But I think one of the key behaviours is just listening to my colleagues on the panel is copy with pride. Everything that's just been said, and then if you magnify that around the networking we do here, we're not alone. So there are so many great ideas out there, and we're all trying to deal with the same volatility and the same threats and risks as we become more resilient. And staying in touch, and just getting those additional insights because it's what you're missing is key. It's we do lots of risk assessments. So constantly analysing what the big change will be and encouraging all of our people to do the same. But it's what we're missing. That's what causes the biggest challenge is the risk that you didn't see and having the agility to cope with that. But those what you don't see becomes less and less the more we work together.
The risk you anticipate is not the risk you are seeing,
yes.
right? That's the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
So nurturing supplier relationships, would you say that's really key as opposed to transactional, old style, traditional ways of working within supply chain?
You need a bit of balance because it's both working together that you see the power. We have. We call it in our business continuity planning the hot, warm and cold backups. So these are for risks that we've assessed, and a hot backup would be it's business ready. The event occurs, we can execute very, very quickly. A warm backup is we've prepared, we might have bill of materials, we might have PLM, we might have tooling in our operations. We have suppliers or backup suppliers identified and ready, and we can execute in weeks, certainly less than 6 months. And then a cold backup is plan ready. It's we know what we would do if this big, but according to our assessment, unlikely event has occurred, and that might take up to a year and that's a very operational and tactical piece of work, but it complements the more strategic, and I think it's working together that we have to continue.
Yeah, I would maybe just add on to what John said there, Claire. On the supplier side and the relationship side, one of the things that myself and the team try to do, and it's touching on what the gents said as well, is I'm scared to death of becoming part of the furniture in Jabil. I've been there 28 years. I only know what I know, but where I can learn is when I go into supplier land and visit our suppliers, who are some of the smartest companies in the world. There's just so much you can learn beyond your own four walls. So we spend probably too much time on the road, but we get a huge amount of value from it. And I'm sure, like the rest of the colleagues here, our suppliers are incredibly important to us. So we put a huge amount of face time with them, either at their facilities or having them there. And even to the point where we've carved out an organisation that is just supplier relationship management. So they are involved in the strategic side of the relationship, not the tactical. They're not chasing POs, placing POs. They're not involved in escalations. They're not involved in commercial discussions around pricing or contracts. These are folks who are trying to, as I always say, I want you to be the PhD of that supplier. I want you to know more about that supplier than the person sitting across from you knows. So I don't want you distracted by anything else other than understanding the 15 suppliers that your portfolio has and becoming that true expert. And that served us really, really well. It's a hard sell internally because people think that organisation is just going to be playing golf and hanging out and having nice dinners, but it goes way, way, way beyond that. And it's I could point to, especially during COVID, the amount of times that those relationships afforded tangible rewards that manifests itself in simply getting access to parts that I don't think we would have got had we not been looked on by the suppliers, investing in them, as well as obviously trying to run our company as efficiently as we can.
Yeah.
Dean, I was going to say, how do you make sure people stay front and centre?
Yeah, no, I mean, what Frank's saying is super interesting, because we have to remember these relationships between the buyers and suppliers it's not a one-way relationship. It is a two-sided equation. And as we look at how we provide the technology to kind of facilitate that, it goes back to that fundamental topic of collaboration. And so how do we provide a collaboration framework that allows real-time two-way communication that you're giving both demand visibility as well as supply visibility at the same time, so that you're not producing a bottleneck on your supplier and they're not producing or creating a bottleneck on your production, if it would be in Frank's world, right? And so we invest heavily as thinking about how do we streamline those capabilities? How do we use agentic agents to help make it simpler? And how do we use the data set that we have to give some predictability to it? And so it's really about bringing those three components together into the platform and creating that framework that allows us to collaborate.
Moving the discussion on a little bit, we've been talking a lot over the last 2 days about all the high-profile disruptions, be it cyber attacks or tariffs. What lessons have you learnt from some of these disruptions? Rashid, first.
As I said, predict the unpredictable is sometimes also not predictable. I'll tell one of our scenarios. We anticipated some of the changes and we moved some of our factories into Vietnam. And guess what? Vietnam also is. So put all the efforts, expedited a 18-month factory transfer to a 12-month, made sure that, tariff 2025 is this much only we pay for the North America market. Guess what, you have to pay tariff, right? So I think the biggest lessons learned for us is having the distributed, supply chain with, capability of also making sure that the local things are done, because when it comes to Europe, sustainability is becoming a big thing. North America a little bit lagging, but Europe and APAC is also coming there. So, looking into this whole thing, making sure that it's coming, it's becoming really challenging. So tariff, we have to live with it, we have to understand it, but the anticipations can be done, but some of the things which is coming is also tough for us. So what we did is, it is better. We gave more visibility to our customer base, like everyone, the partners, confidence. But at the end of the day, I think it's very hard, to be very frank, to predict exactly how it will be. So you have to go with the flow, but take the ones where, you make sure that you have distributed it evenly, looking at different angles. Yeah.
John, lessons learned for you?
Just a quick bill, and I think it links to the risk assessment I was talking about. Cyber attack or tariff changes are just two of the hundreds of risks out there in the VUCA world. They're not the only ones. But the key lesson for me is, if you take tariffs as an example, which is in our desire to provide solutions to the business on agility, sometimes you can fall into the risk of knee-jerking. And I think we've seen with tariffs that, it's changed every week.
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand what's going to happen in 6 months' time, or in the midterm elections in the US, or in the competitive landscape of, the global economies. It's very difficult. So it's maintaining a little bit of balance in there and not just jumping to a fast wrong solution. So that's the key learning for us. Don't knee-jerk.
It is about balance, isn't it? Whether it's resilience, efficiency, sustainability. How do you strike that balance, Frank?
Well, yeah. It's not easy, of course, by any manner of means. Even just, I'll try and answer your question, but even just touching on what John said there, if I think about it, I mean, even something as simple as understanding country of origin that you're getting from your suppliers, we never had to care too much about that in the past, so the data was never anything that, at least in the Jabil world, that we had to go and look for or collate or understand. Now you have to understand where your parts are coming from, so you can have the minimal impact from tariffs. So we are. That would be a lesson learned for us. The data is there. It's just how do you ask for it? How do you collect it? How do you then digest it? And make sense of it as well. And how accurate is it? And it actually turns out that even suppliers don't know where they build their own things, which is just insane. But that is the reality of the electronics world today. So there's a lot going on there. To try and even just touch on your question, I don't know if you can really give it balance, but you've got to try. And I think we do a reasonable job of at least understanding each of the challenges and putting solutions in place that I think have a better answer than yesterday. And again, it just comes back. I hate always saying people, process, technology, but that is what makes this world that we live in tick. And I think as long as you have that balance and you're making smart investments and you're hiring smart people and you're using the tech that's available. I mean, if you walk out into the show there's some really cool stuff going on. And if you just make smart decisions about where you place your investments, then that balance will come through okay.
So increasingly, supply chain strategy, it seems to me, rather than being seen as a back office function, it's actually starting to drive whole organisational strategy. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Oh, good. How important is that? I mean, that's obviously great for people in your field, but how important is it that the leaders of an organisation listen to supply chain leads?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting because I think what we're seeing is we've spent 30 years kind of building the foundation of our ERPs, our supply chain planning systems, spent the last 10 years on data. And so now we're starting to harness that data. And the people that understand that data is your supply chain leads themselves, right? And so as we think about planning for the future, what the supply chain of tomorrow looks like, is that understanding of how do we harness data, how do we bring that together, how do we plan our functions in a way that set us up for success. And one of the things we've been challenged with, I would say, and I love that my peers here would kind of chime in, but we've built internal silos in our organizations as we think about procurement and finance and supply chain and even across demand planning versus production planning. And so how do we bring that internal collaboration and harmonization of that data to the teams so that when we take decisions, and we talk about global complexities, but we create massive complexities ourselves within our own four walls by creating these silos. So how do we break down those silos so that when we think about the data, we think about the decisions we're making, we understand all the trade-offs across the business, not just in one function. So I kind of challenge my peers here to think about, like, what does that look like when we think about those complexities and how do we tackle that?
If you look at the whole supply chain thing, supply chain used to be the fulfillment, delivery kind of function with the product house, the innovation, all the value. Now, the resilience we have brought in has made supply chain as a value add, right? For example, we are a product company, a solution company, but during the supply chain crisis, because one of the good things we did was because of all the reactivity, proactivity, buffer planning, relationships, we didn't cancel one order during that whole thing, which was a great thing for us. But that made the value chain important for supply chain. So in our company now, we are a strategic pillar into the whole thing. It's not just innovation of the product, it's not just the service what we provide, like from a product standpoint. It is also delivery as a, value chain. So it has become, one of the key strategic pillars. Now, within that strategic pillar, how do you connect has become also one of the key things, the collaboration again comes into a big picture. And the visibility part of it now is provided, like when it comes to pushing something out faster, operations is looked as the agent to make it happen. So it has changed the thinking of supply chain into a value add in the organization as the key change maker. So this is key for me. That's what I have seen in my organization.
Thank you. John?
I mean, when I started in supply chain, the mindset was the best supply chain is the one I don't talk about. It's invisibly delivering in the background.
Exactly.
And when we talk about it at corporate strategy level, it's because we've got a problem. So that was the the paradigm. A lot of people think that COVID changed all that, and when Biden was talking about supply chain issues and it was front of mind, that's where the switch occurred. I think it's been happening for a lot longer than that, and I think supply chain has had a seat at the table on corporate strategy and on influencing direction for quite a long time. What varies is where on the table that seat is. And that really depends on your business model. Is how important is supply chain in free cash flow, in cost and margin, in technology and building the business. And that will dictate whether the seat is towards the CEO at the center of the table or the head of the table, or stuck at the far end, squinting to try and see the screen. And I think that's just the reality of various business models. But I think supply chain has a key role, and our challenge always is how we leverage that seat at the table to influence.
Couldn't agree more. I think in the opening question, Claire, you had mentioned that I report directly to our CEO, which happened about 5 years ago, and it was a result of just quite simply our CEO saying, "Where's Frank?" "Oh, he's off golfing." No. And he said, "Hey, I'm going to change things and bring you front and center," because he quickly realised that how fragile, how complex supply chains are, and if I don't have a seat at the table, then I can't get a voice, I can't ask for the investment, and there's a risk that the company would end up maybe not meeting our free cash flow goals, maybe not meeting our margin goals, or sustainability goals, or anything else that we have a direct impact in, so that change is made. And I don't think we're ever going back. I think this function has been elevated so much, and I think now the really nice thing is there's a path to CEO for really smart supply chain and procurement leaders, which never existed before. So I think we'll get more smart people coming into the function because you can see a path right to running a company if that's something that you would aspire to. And I think that is phenomenal because that door wasn't open 10 years ago. It just, it was very, very, very rare. Now you've got tons of examples. Look at Tim Cook. I mean, he was a supply chain guy, and he's running Apple, and there's tons of other examples of that as well. So I think, not that I think COVID was a good thing, but I think it helped just raise the function and give people an understanding of just how critical it is. And I think we're also in the US, where Dean and I are based. We're seeing more and more colleges and universities offer degrees and programs that are actually meaningful now, because back a few years ago there was tons of supply chain degrees, none of them had any meat, and there's MBAs out there that actually are worth something, and you can become an actual practitioner through the education and come into the workforce. So I think it's a good thing.
Just trigger a point there, because I think the education of supply chain people and where supply chain people come from, it's typically been engineering type roles, certainly STEM, and I think what we're all seeing now, and again it's linked to technology, is the importance of data science as a skill. And as an absolute minimum, supply chain leaders who can understand how to leverage that data analytics capability. They might not be data scientists or might not be, having 10,000 hours of Python programming, but the ability to manage that, just you trigger that with the, the skills and education point.
I think it's also understanding the details, if you have an engineering mind, that's what you need today. So it's pretty...
Thank you all very much. I'd like to throw this open to the floor to see if there are any questions. Please put your hand up if you'd like to ask the panel anything. I can't see any hands, so I may ask you one more question myself. I'm going to ask you, this is a bit of a big one really. If you had any one piece of good advice to give to leaders starting to rethink their supply chain strategy in the current climate, what would it be? Dean.
Oh, wow. Rethink the supply chain strategy. I mean, for me, it's the quality of your data is by far probably the biggest attribute to success. And so every customer we speak with, that we work with, by far the kind of the Achilles heel, the front end of the project is loaded with data challenges and understanding, and harmonizing that data is the biggest challenge we have ahead of us. We have so much available to us. We have sensors everywhere. How do we start harmonizing that data in a way that we can actually use it? I think that's by far the biggest takeaway right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Seeing nods across the line. Yeah. Well, thank you, gentlemen.
So if I could just add very quickly one, because I've made so many mistakes on this in developing strategies, and it's been one of my learnings, in supply chain, I don't think we focus enough on the consumer and being consumer conscious, consumer centric in our strategies. We tend to gravitate towards the technology into the flows. And when we get business focused, it's typically internally is how do we support the company's business strategy. And I think as a supply chain group focusing on consumer, I mean, I'm coming from a consumer goods background, understanding your consumer and working back from that, I would say has been a key learning.
I think this triggers to tell me that I think in supply chain, listening has become more and more than, because earlier supply chain was so structured. Now you need to listen to all aspects of the organization to make that visibility. So it's very, very key.
Well, thank you all. I'm sorry we have to leave it there for time reasons, but it's been really super talking to you. Frank, Dean, Rashid and John. Round of applause for our panel, please.